never had an eating disorder. At any level, you will feel insecure. I did not want to become a professional ballerina. I could start seeing the differences in my body. I could see that I was skinnier. I was the smallest little twig of a human being. I loved food. I was tracking every single bite of food that went into my body. What would happen if I lost weight? Hi guys, and welcome to today's video. As you can tell by the title, it's going to be a little bit of a different format today. Felt a calling to really share my story around food and eating and my body because it's such an important topic to discuss, and while the dance world is evolving and many more people are speaking out about their struggles, there is still so much that isn't talked about. I really just want to assure at least one person out there that is going through something remotely similar that they're not alone, and you can be in a place where you genuinely do not actively want to lose weight. And that feels like such a revolutionary thing to say, especially for me to say to myself, because I've spent the majority of my dance career, from training to getting this first job I have with Orlando Ballet's second company, hating the way I looked and taking every gift I had for granted because I could only focus on what I hated about myself. I did just wash my hair, which is why it's a little stringy looking, and I'm gonna be fussing with it quite a lot, so just be prepared for that. I'm just gonna talk about my struggles with my own body and what it was like growing up in the ballet world with a quote unquote I'm already losing my voice. I'm gonna be drinking from this bottle a lot. What it was like growing up in the ballet world in a not a ballet body, because I don't have the stereotypical hyperextended legs, perfect feet, tiny waist, small hips. If you are one of those people, I don't want to invalidate any struggles that you have. That is not the body that I grew up in, and I am now a professional ballerina, or beginning my professional career. There's still a lot of the same struggles I had when I was a kid that I thought would disappear when I got to this moment. At any level, you will feel insecure and you will have your doubts. Even the most prima professional ballerinas feel insecure some days, and it's about learning how to work through those insecurities that actually makes you a professional able to pursue ballet for a long career, because the mental game is just as important as your physical strength. I never was diagnosed with any sort of eating disorder or went into like a clinical treatment because of how severe my situation got. This is why I have been very hesitant to talk about it, because I never had an eating disorder, point blank, period. And yet I know that so many people are in the position I am, that they didn't actually have an eating disorder, but they struggled really intensely. As I started going through puberty, I obviously started noticing changes in my body. And looking back on it now, I was the smallest little twig of a human being. I just had these little boobs. That is all I could see. I saw my butt and I saw my boobs in the mirror. And the studio that I was at actually happened to have some really, really wonky mirrors. And I didn't really know what fat mirrors were at the time. And if you're a ballet dancer or dancer of any kind, you probably know that term very well. I would stand in front of this one mirror every day and I didn't know how wonky it was. And genuinely now, was it the mirror? Was it just my mind playing tricks on me? I don't know. But I would just stare at myself and be full of this hatred towards what I looked like. Nobody really knew how much I struggled. I just was full of this self-loathing and hatred, and it really did hinder my ability to progress, I think, because I spent so much time worrying that my physical capacity was not enough. Like the way I looked would be the reason I wasn't a professional ballet dancer. I genuinely thought that held me back from pushing myself harder, which is so sad to think about now. This went on for years, and obviously I just kept growing and getting bigger because I was a developing teenager, and that's what bodies do as they grow up. They just change. I despised myself more and more each year. On the other hand of this, I grew up in a family that had such a healthy relationship with food. And I think this is another reason I was able to stay so mentally okay for as long as I did, because we would eat family dinner every single night. We would eat healthy and nourishing foods. And the way my family acted around food genuinely kept me as healthy as I stayed, and is the reason I have such a healthy relationship with food today. So now I'm about 16, 17, super self-conscious about my quads. That is still my biggest insecurity. Or I don't want to say that. That was my biggest insecurity, was the size of my quads. My quads are very developed and they don't have that stereotypical line that most ballet dancers do. It is still a little bit of an insecurity for me because it does mess up your line in some positions, or when I'm standing on it, I always see like a large bulging muscle. And I will say it's gotten a lot better since I've gotten into weightlifting and the gym, and it just changed the way I look at muscles. I look at them for strength, and I look at them as a sign of strength, and I look at them for what they can do for me instead of looking at everything that's wrong with them and I hate the way they look. Was never really called out for being overweight, and I definitely was not overweight in any way, but I constantly had these thoughts of being too big for ballet. In my senior year of high school, we were in our Nutcracker season and I had been casted horribly, and I felt like it was a reflection on who I was as a person. I took it very personally. This was the time that I was auditioning, and by the time I was a senior in high school, I had pretty much decided that I did not want to become a professional ballerina. I was going to college and I was going to dance in college and just do that because I wasn't ready to stop doing ballet, but I knew that I wasn't good enough to get into a company. Let's say around Nutcracker, I had already been to a few auditions for college dance programs. I'd gotten some rejections, I'd gotten some callbacks. With this auditioning piece, there was a lot of video auditions. So while I wasn't really realizing it at the time, I do think this was slowly having an effect on my mental health. I distinctly remember this time I was going to act upon all these negative self-thoughts. So I was sitting in a Nutcracker rehearsal on the side, and I just thought to myself, what would happen if I lost weight? That was literally my thought process. And so I decided I would. That was the first step. And through the next month, this was in early December, the next month, I just spent severely restricting my food. And I don't really want to get into numbers, but I was tracking every single bite of food that went into my body in a way that I don't even know how I had time for it, because it was incredibly time consuming. And when I wasn't on my phone trying to track everything, I was thinking about it in my head of like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna like get this and remember exactly what I just ate? I do remember one of those Nutcracker shows, I went on stage literally having had a coffee, and it was the most anxious and unstable I'd ever felt, and I was literally scared on stage. At this point, I wasn't even really showing signs of what I was doing, but it was getting to a point where I was scared. And I remember having a little bit of fear in my head and just being like, well, this is the sacrifice I need to make. I come back from winter break, having restricted all through Christmas, all through my sister's birthday, and I came back and I made leaps of improvement with my ballet within like a few weeks. And I had this major college ballet audition coming up. It was for Indiana Bloomington. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna be my target weight by February. Go to school all day, barely eating anything. I would go to ballet class for 3 hours every single night, rehearsing variation after variation after variation. It was a very bad cycle to be in. I was so motivated and driven and like in this toxic go mindset that it ended up really paying off with my ballet technique, but the trade-offs were just devastating. My mom started to be a little concerned, but I would just always brush it off and say, oh, no, I'm fine. I'm just like exercising a lot, whatever. And around this time, I got the best casting I'd ever gotten. I got a lead pas de deux in this neoclassical ballet that we were performing in the spring. And so it felt like everything was falling into place. I was getting challenged on stage, I was challenged in the studio, and everybody was recognizing that something had happened. As good as the intentions were behind this amazing casting, it was really bad for my mental state at the time because I got the best role I had ever gotten in my entire life. It was a pas de deux, and I'd never done that before. So I got this great casting. All my teachers were like, wow, like you've made so much improvement, whatever. Whether or not they were congratulating my weight loss, I'll never know. Maybe they just noticed that I was working really hard and improving my technique. I also was no longer getting my period, and I remember thinking of this as the marker that what I was doing was right. I could start seeing the differences in my body. I could see that I was skinnier, but the fact that I didn't have a period, I celebrated. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, yay, I'm too skinny to have a period. And the fact that I even thought that that was okay and that was good is so upsetting to me now. Yeah, I lost it for about a year. Getting it back has been the hardest thing I've had to do, and I'm still not healed from it, which is so frustrating that I would do that to myself because getting your period is one of the healthiest. That is how you know your body is healthy. So I performed in this amazing role. And by the way, I didn't even get into IU. I was still in a major restrictive phase. Nobody could really tell because I loved food. I would just eat lots and lots of vegetables and not actually eat the right nutrients for me. And I've talked to my mom a little bit about it because I was like, did you know, like, were you noticing? And she was like, I did notice physically changes, but I also noticed that you just would eat. So it looked like you were eating, but you would just eat very, very little. So over the summer, my family went to Spain. I had started to gain a little bit of weight back, both because the show was over and I was out of ballet. So I had a lot more time and I was just eating a bit more, exercising a bit less. I was the most mentally unwell that I've ever been in my entire life. I would cry every single day. I felt like a complete failure. The way I thought I would feel when I had finally reached this goal weight and everything was falling into place was the exact opposite. I have never felt worse about myself than I felt during the time when I was my smallest. So once I got rejected from Indiana Bloomington, I was feeling pretty low. But I had made so much improvement, I was like, I don't want to go to college anymore. I want to go to professional ballet. I want to become a professional ballerina. I want to get into a company and I'm going to do this. And my mom was like, okay, because it came out of nowhere. So I did end up going to one ballet audition, didn't get in. This is when my world came crashing down because I decided I want to be a professional ballerina in March or April and companies have already decided who they're hiring. So it just really was not good. My timing was very horrible and it didn't work out. I decided over the summer that I was going to the University of Utah to pursue ballet. And my mom was like, you need to go to college, Aurora. You need to get out of your studio. You need to go out and see the world. We would argue about it every single day. She knew what was best for me, but I could not see it. The dieting didn't last long. It was maybe 5 months of severe restriction and then I just stopped being able to restrict myself anymore. Literally gained back the weight that I had lost excessively. I still had no period and my mental state was a wreck. So I was still in this state of mental restrictions where I was counting every single calorie that was going into my body, but not necessarily restricting them. It was a very complicated place to be. This was the hardest time for me because I was obviously not seeing results in my body because I was eating a normal amount of food or even more than normal amount because I was compensating for all the months that I had not eaten enough. So my head was restricting, but my body was actually consuming or over consuming. So food was just always in my mind in a very bad way. I went to college knowing that I wanted to become a professional after a year. So I knew I was going to be going into an audition season and I was able to stay pretty motivated throughout my college freshman year. But still, I was in this mindset of, oh, I'm too big, I need to lose weight, I need to lose weight, I need to lose weight. But I really wasn't able to act on it because my body had learned that, oh, if you get hungry enough, you can override that mental restriction and just eat. And that's like a very difficult thing to explain because I almost swung in the opposite direction. I would just not eat and then I would eat more. And then I would not eat and then I would eat more. And it was just a back and forth yo-yo, very, very bad cycle to be in. Obviously it was bad for my mental health, but I still couldn't get a regular period because my body was confused. I wasn't eating regular amounts of food. I was either under eating or overeating and just not getting anywhere positive. Spring of my freshman year of college, I ended up getting this job here with Orlando Ballet's second company. I was so excited. I realized this is my way out. This is what I've needed. I will say I think my mental state became a little bit better right at the end of college. I started focusing on eating a lot of protein, dipping my toe in the idea of cross-training and such stuff like that. And I think that this is when stuff started to get better. I now had this ballet job, which was the epitome of what I wanted. This is exactly what I had dreamed. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've made it. Everything's gonna be okay now. I'm not gonna have any more insecurities and I'm not gonna have any more worries. And at this point, I was definitely in a normal place with food, I would say. I wasn't restricting anymore and my mental peace had gotten a lot better. Like I still worried sometimes if I was eating something that was unhealthy, but it wasn't the level of mental restriction that I had had back in the beginning of my freshman year. I still didn't have a regular period, but I had gotten my period back a few months ago. So I knew that stuff was starting to level out, but getting it regular, that was a whole other wheelhouse. I realized that so many of my insecurities they hadn't disappeared, which is obvious because I hadn't done any work to get rid of them. Insecurities don't disappear even if you have external affirmation, because if you don't believe them internally, then what people say doesn't even matter or what job you have doesn't even matter. I was still very dissatisfied with the way I looked. I didn't think my body was right for ballet, and I was genuinely quite unhappy. And I was like, what am I gonna do? Because I've gotten this job. I thought this job was all I wanted, and I thought it was gonna solve all my problems, but it didn't. So that's when I started finding out about weightlifting. And I found this woman on Instagram called Lily Pfeiffer. She has an incredible business called the Barbell Ballerina. And I signed up for one of her programs. It's the intermediate weightlifting program. And I realized that I could actually chase being strong over being my smallest version of myself. This has kind of been the key thing that helped me be satisfied with the way I looked. I realized that I could sink into my strength. My developed quads and my bigger build could actually be a strength for me. I could become an incredible jumper. I could be super solid. I could have a solid core. Like, I started to recognize my own potential and my own gifts. The only person I can ever be is myself, right? That's obvious. We all know that. When those thoughts creep in of, oh, I wish I looked like her. Oh, I wish I looked like her. Oh, I wish I danced like her. You will never look like them. You will never dance like them. And so stop wasting your time by trying to be somebody else, because that's going to limit your own potential. I've only been weightlifting about 6 months, but I started to just feel really good about myself. I started to feel stronger in class, stopped wanting to lose weight and wanting to constantly change the way I looked. And obviously sometimes I look in the mirror and I wish I was more toned and I wish I could see more of my muscles, but I understand that the more I grow and the more muscle I get, the more you will see it. So it's a process, and at every stage of the process, I need to try to love myself, because without this stage of the process, there's not going to be a next stage. That sort of sums up my story, and I just really word vomited for the past 35 minutes. No matter where you are right now, there is potential to be totally okay with your body. There is potential for you to love yourself, and as cliche and difficult as that might sound and be very hard for you to believe, I was in that position once, and where I am now, I am genuinely full of so much love, respect, and appreciation for my body. When I think back to that little 18-year-old that just wanted to shrink and just wanted to get that audition and just wanted to get that perfect job because every problem would disappear, when I think back to that little girl, all I want is for her to have a video like this to watch and just understand that actually embracing your strength or embracing your differences is going to put you where you need to be. I still look at videos of myself and I just question if what I'm doing is worthwhile and if what I'm doing is actually the right thing to do, because most people around you, especially older teachers in the ballet world around you, are always trying to just emphasize the slim, the tiny, the smallest version of yourself, right? There's so much of that energy around us. It's difficult when you go against that narrative and say, wait a minute, actually I've tried that and it really didn't work for me. Is there another option? And for me, there was. Building strength and actually embracing being a strong and powerful dancer, because that's beautiful too. It's really difficult to believe that when everything around you is telling you otherwise. So I just want to validate that anybody out there that's just feeling surrounded by all this negative energy or trying to find their path while being told to be smaller or shrink, or that you're not toned enough, or that you need to slim down, all of that negative energy is just noise. Some days it's more of a struggle for me because somebody will say something and it makes me question, is this ballet world even right for me? Because I want something so different from everybody else. That's my story of how I got to where I am today. My YouTube channel is my current journey. This is my current step of my journey. In 10 years, I'm gonna have a new timeline and I'm gonna be looking back on this point and being like, wow, like she was really fighting to find herself, and I'm so glad she did, because where she is today in 10 years is exactly where she was meant to be. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, leave me a comment down below. Let me know that it resonated. And before I actually lose my voice once and for all, goodbye. I love you all so much.